One stormy night, a bleeding stranger collapses on her doorstep, begging for her help. Nia, a nursing student far from home, has no idea she's about to hide one of Korea's most feared gangster bosses, or that her heart, her life, and her safety will all be on the line. Secrets, lies, and danger lurk in every shadow, and love might just be the deadliest risk of all. Watch as a simple act of kindness turns into a high-stakes battle for love and survival in the heart of Seoul. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications. You don't want to miss a single twist of this thrilling romantic suspense story. Nia Okoro pressed her forehead against the window pane of her tiny Seoul apartment, watching raindrops race each other down the glass. The storm outside was relentless, sheets of rain hammering the streets below, neon lights blurring into streaks of pink and blue. She had been in South Korea for 6 months now, and nights like this reminded her how far away she was from home. Her textbooks lay open across the desk, but her eyes kept drifting. Nursing school was demanding endless hours of lectures, late-night studying, and the added pressure of being a foreign student. She missed her mother's cooking, the chatter of Lagos streets, the comfort of being surrounded by familiar faces. Here, she was constantly aware of her difference, her skin, her accent, her presence in classrooms where she always stood out. She sighed, pulling her blanket tighter around her shoulders. Just one more chapter of anatomy, she told herself. Just one more page. But then it came, the sound. At first, it was faint, almost drowned by the thunder. A heavy thud, like something or someone slamming against her door. She froze, the pen slipping from her fingers. For a moment, she thought it was her imagination, the storm playing tricks on her. Then came another noise, a groan, low and ragged, followed by the scraping sound of movement. Her heart stuttered. She hesitated, pulse racing. Seoul was safe compared to back home, but danger could exist anywhere. What if it was a drunk neighbor? What if it was worse? She crept toward the door, barefoot, every instinct screaming for her to stay back. Another crash. This time, the door rattled on its hinges. Nia gasped and pressed her back against the wall, staring at the handle as if it might turn. The storm roared louder outside, wind howling, rain pelting the windows. She reached for her phone with shaking hands, ready to call security, but then she heard it. A voice. Weak, broken. Help, please. Her breath caught in her throat. It wasn't the slurred shout of a drunk man. It was a desperate plea. Against all logic, against every warning voice in her head, Nia unlocked the door and pulled it open just a crack. The man who collapsed against her threshold nearly knocked her over. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and drenched, his dark hair plastered to his forehead. Blood soaked through his shirt, spreading in deep crimson patches. His face was pale, twisted in pain, and his eyes, sharp, dark eyes, locked onto hers for a split second before he crumpled at her feet. Nia's scream caught in her throat. "Oh my God," she whispered, dropping to her knees. "Sir, can you hear me?" He groaned, clutching his side. "Please don't call the police." That made her hesitate. Why wouldn't he want the police? But then she saw the wound properly. A stab wound, deep and bleeding heavily, and her training kicked in. She had practiced simulations 100 times, treated minor injuries during clinical hours, but never something like this. Still, she couldn't just let him die on her floor. Okay, I've got you," she murmured, steadying her hands even though her heart raced. Dragging him inside, she pushed the door shut with her foot. Rainwater pooled around him, mixing with blood. Her small apartment suddenly felt too tight, too suffocating for what was happening. She grabbed towels, disinfectant, and the small first aid kit she kept for emergencies. He hissed in pain as she tore open his shirt, revealing the gash across his ribs. "Hold still," she ordered, her voice firmer than she felt. His eyes flicked up to hers, full of pain but also something else. Caution. Desperation. "You shouldn't be helping me," he muttered. "Yeah, well, you picked the wrong nursing student's door to collapse in front of," she snapped, trying to mask her fear. "Now shut up and let me stop the bleeding." She worked quickly, pressing gauze to the wound, disinfecting, stitching with trembling but precise hands. Every hiss, Every groan from him made her chest tighten. He was strong. His body screamed of power and control, but in this moment, he was fragile, vulnerable. When she finally tied off the last stitch, sweat beaded her forehead. She sat back on her heels, exhaling shakily. "You need a hospital. You've lost too much blood." "No hospital," he said sharply, struggling to sit up. "They'll find me." "Who?" The question slipped out before she could stop it. Silence stretched. His jaw clenched. He wouldn't answer. Frustration bubbled inside her, but exhaustion won. She shook her head.
"Fine.
"But you can't stay here. I can't hide a stranger in my apartment. I don't even know your name." For the first time, a faint smirk touched his lips, though it was shadowed by pain. "Min-suk." Nia swallowed. His voice was low, steady even now. "Dangerous, maybe. Well, Min-suk, you'll stay tonight. Just tonight. Tomorrow you're gone." But as she helped him lie down on her couch, arranging pillows under his head, something inside her whispered that this was no ordinary stranger. The storm outside thundered, rattling her windows, as if echoing the storm she had just let into her life. Before sleep claimed him, Min-suk's hand gripped hers weakly. "Just a few days," he murmured. "I'll leave when it's safe. I promise." Her chest tightened, torn between fear and pity. She should have said no. She should have pushed him back into the storm and locked her door. But she didn't. As she sat watching him breathe, her textbooks abandoned, Nia felt the weight of her choice sink in. She had opened her door to a wounded stranger. A man who bled secrets as much as he bled onto her floor. And though she didn't know it yet, that single choice had just rewritten the course of her life. The next morning, Nia woke to the sound of rain dripping from the eaves and a faint rustle from the couch. She sat up, half convinced last night had been some kind of fever dream. But no, the stranger was still there. Kang Min-suk. He lay stretched across her small couch, his chest rising and falling unevenly, his face pale against the pillow. The bandage she'd wrapped around his side was already stained through with blood. Nia's heart clenched. She had saved his life, but his body wasn't healing fast enough. "You shouldn't still be here," she muttered under her breath, more to herself than to him. But when she leaned closer, she caught the faint smell of antiseptic, the memory of his ragged plea echoing in her mind. Just a few days. "I'll leave when it's safe." Those few days stretched longer than she could have imagined. Nia's life quickly became a balancing act, one she wasn't sure she could keep up. In the mornings, she rushed to her nursing classes, her bag heavier than usual. Tucked inside weren't just her textbooks and notebooks, but stolen bandages, alcohol wipes, antibiotics, and sometimes painkillers lifted quietly from the university's hospital wing. Her heart raced every time she slipped them into her bag, terrified of being caught. At home, she treated Min-suk in secret. His wound healed slower than she wanted, and he never explained why he couldn't simply go to a hospital. Instead, he'd sit silently as she changed his bandages, his eyes following her every movement, unreadable and sharp. "You shouldn't be doing this for me," he said one night, his voice low. "You're right," she replied without looking at him. "I shouldn't, but I am. So stop talking and hold still." He smirked faintly, though his wince betrayed the pain. "Bossy." Nia ignored the strange flutter in her chest. She refused to let herself feel anything for this man. He was a stranger, a dangerous one. Days passed, and the atmosphere in her apartment shifted. The silence between them began filling with unexpected things. Sometimes, she'd come home from class to find Min-suk had tidied her books, folded her laundry, or left the kettle hot for tea. Other times, she'd catch him studying her with a curious expression, as though he couldn't understand why she was helping him at all. They clashed often, their differences sparking like flint against stone. "You can't just sit here all day doing nothing," she told him once, frustrated after a long shift at her part-time cafe job. "I'm injured," he replied coolly, sipping tea as though it were the most obvious excuse in the world. "You're not useless." She threw her bag on the chair. "You could at least wash the dishes or something." To her shock, the next morning the kitchen was spotless. She found him leaning against the counter, looking smug. "You're welcome," he said. It was the first time she laughed in weeks. But the storm outside her little apartment hadn't passed. It was only getting closer. One evening, as she walked back from the university, her friend Jiun hurried to her side. "Nia," Jiun whispered, glancing nervously over her shoulder. "I don't want to scare you, but there are men near your building. I saw them yesterday and again today. They don't look like neighbors." Nia's blood ran cold. "What do you mean?" she asked, forcing her voice to sound casual. "They keep asking around. About who lives there. Be careful, okay?" Nia nodded, but her mind was already racing. When she reached her apartment, her hands trembled as she unlocked the door. Inside, Min-suk was sitting on the couch, phone in hand. He quickly ended a call the moment she walked in. Her eyes narrowed. "Who was that?" "No one important." "Don't lie to me," she shot back, anger masking her fear. "People are hanging around outside, asking questions. Does that have something to do with you?" Min-suk's jaw tightened, his expression unreadable. "You don't need to worry about them." Her heart pounded. "Of course I need to worry. They're outside my building, Min-suk. My life is already complicated enough, and now..." "Stop." His voice cut sharp through the room. "I told you I'll handle it." For a long moment, their eyes locked. Hers burned with frustration, his with something darker, something he refused to explain. Finally, Nia turned away, her throat tight. "You should have never come here." But later that night, when she found him quietly grimacing as he tried to change his own bandage, she wordlessly took the supplies from his hands and did it for him. Neither spoke, but the air between them shifted, filled with something raw and unspoken. The cracks in his facade grew wider with every day they spent together. She caught him one morning staring at the rain outside, his usually sharp eyes clouded with sadness. "Do you regret it?" she asked before she could stop herself. He looked at her, startled. "Regret what?" "Whatever it is that put you in this mess." For once, he didn't deflect. He simply gave a humorless smile. "Every day." Her chest ached at the quiet honesty in his voice. She wanted to ask more, but she didn't. She was afraid of the answers. The tension grew heavier when she noticed the calls. Min-suk's phone buzzed often, at odd hours, with numbers she didn't recognize. He would answer in curt tones, speaking in Korean too fast for her to catch everything. Words like deal and location slipped out sometimes, and his expression always darkened afterward. "Who keeps calling you?" she asked one night, crossing her arms. "Business," he said flatly. "You don't have a business," she countered. That earned her a sharp look, the kind that should have scared her into silence. But instead, she held her ground. "I don't need to explain myself to you," he said finally, turning away. Something inside her snapped. "You're living in my apartment, eating my food, using my things, and you won't even tell me why people are outside watching me? Don't you think I deserve the truth?" The silence that followed was deafening. Min-suk turned back to her slowly, his eyes unreadable. "If I told you the truth," he said quietly, "you wouldn't look at me the same way again." Her breath caught. She wanted to press him, demand an answer, but something in his voice, something almost broken, stopped her. She swallowed hard and looked away. "Then maybe I don't want to know." That night, Nia lay awake, staring at the ceiling, her chest tight with confusion. She should have been terrified of him. She should have thrown him out weeks ago. Instead, all she could think about was the way his voice softened when he said her name. The way he tried to hide his pain but let her see glimpses of it anyway. The way his presence filled the apartment, steady and dangerous but also safe, somehow. She hated herself for it, but she couldn't deny it anymore. Nia was falling for the stranger bleeding secrets on her couch. And deep down, she knew whatever he was hiding, whatever world he came from, it was going to crash into her soon. The days blurred into a fragile rhythm. Nia went to class, worked her cafe shifts, and then hurried home to tend to the man who had somehow taken over her life. Kang Min-suk. But lately, she couldn't ignore the cracks forming in his carefully built walls. He'd say he needed air, disappearing for hours at a time despite his injuries. When she asked where he went, he would answer with vague excuses, just errands, or meeting an old friend. His phone never stopped buzzing. And sometimes, in the dim light of evening, she caught his expression hardening into something cold, something ruthless, when he thought she wasn't looking. Her instincts told her he was hiding more than pain. He was hiding his entire life. One rainy afternoon, Nia came home earlier than expected. She pushed open the apartment door quietly, shaking off her umbrella. The apartment was empty. Min-suk's jacket was gone. For a moment, she felt relief. A few hours without the tension, without the weight of unanswered questions. She exhaled until she noticed the edge of her closet door slightly ajar. Nia frowned. She never left it open. Slowly, she stepped closer. Her heart pounded as she pulled it open. Inside, beneath her neatly stacked clothes and books, a black duffel bag sat shoved against the wall. It didn't belong to her. Her hands trembled as she unzipped it. Inside were things she'd never expected to see in real life. A pistol wrapped in a cloth, stacks of cash bound with rubber bands, and papers filled with codes and names she didn't recognize. Tucked at the bottom was a folded newspaper clipping, its headline screaming in bold letters. Mafia leader suspected in gang turf war, Kang Min-suk at the center of violence. Nia's breath caught in her throat. The photograph showed him, slightly younger, in a sharp suit, his face serious and distant. There was no mistake. The man sleeping on her couch, the man she'd been nursing back to health, was no ordinary fugitive. He was a mafia boss. Her knees buckled. The clipping slipped from her hands. All this time, she had been risking everything for a criminal. When Min-suk finally returned that evening, she was waiting for him. The duffel bag sat on the table between them. The gun, the money, the papers, the clipping laid out like evidence at a crime scene. His eyes flickered once, then went cold. "You went through my things." Nia's voice shook. "What is this, Min-suk? Who are you really?" He didn't answer. He just closed the door behind him and walked further inside, his expression unreadable. "Tell me," she cried, her chest tightening. "All this time, you've been lying to me. Do you know what it feels like to wake up every day wondering if you're putting me in danger? Do you even care?" Finally, his jaw clenched. "You weren't supposed to find out this way. So it's true." Her voice broke. You're a mafia boss." The silence that followed confirmed everything. Nia's heart shattered. She stumbled back, tears stinging her eyes. "I took care of you. I trusted you. And all this time you were just using me as a hiding place." "That's not what this is," he said sharply, stepping forward. "Then what is it, Min-suk? Because from where I'm standing, you've done nothing but lie." He froze, his fists tightening at his sides. For a moment, it looked like he wanted to tell her something important. But then, he only exhaled heavily, turning his face away. Nia felt her chest collapse in on itself. "Get out," she whispered. His eyes snapped to hers. "I don't want you here anymore," she said, her voice firmer this time. "I don't care who's after you. You've already ruined enough of my life. Just leave." Min-suk stood very still. His face was a mask, but his eyes betrayed something raw, something that looked almost like hurt. But he didn't argue. He simply gave a short nod and walked toward the door. When it closed behind him, the sound echoed like the breaking of something fragile and irreplaceable. For 2 days, Nia tried to carry on as though nothing had happened. She went to her classes, worked her shifts, and returned to her empty apartment. But she couldn't stop shaking every time she remembered the look in his eyes, or the cold fear that came with knowing she had sheltered a man who lived in blood and shadows. Still, some part of her missed his presence. The quiet mornings, the way he sometimes smiled when she scolded him, the strange safety she felt, even knowing he was dangerous. She told herself it was better this way, that her life could return to normal. She was wrong. It happened late one evening. She was walking home from the cafe, the streets unusually quiet. A van pulled up suddenly beside her, its headlights glaring. Before she could react, the door slid open and 2 men in black rushed out. Hands grabbed her, rough and merciless. She screamed, kicking and thrashing, but a cloth pressed against her mouth cut off the sound. Her vision blurred. The last thing she saw was the van door slamming shut. When Nia woke, her head throbbed. She was tied to a chair in a dim, abandoned warehouse, the smell of oil and rust thick in the air. Shadows loomed all around her. A man stepped forward, tall and broad, his face scarred from old battles. His smile was cruel. "You must be the girl," he said in accented English. "The one he's been hiding with." Nia's blood turned to ice. "You think Kang Min-suk cares for you? You're just his weakness." And now, the man leaned closer, his grin widening. "You'll be the bait that brings him to us." Her chest tightened in terror. She realized the horrifying truth. Min-suk's enemies had found her. She wasn't just collateral damage anymore. She was the trap. The moment Min-suk got the call, he knew. A trembling voice on the other end of the line confirmed his worst fear. They have her.
Nia.
He had tried to protect her by leaving, tried to keep her away from his world. But in the end, she had been dragged into the very darkness he had wanted to shield her from. His enemies had found the one thing he could not bear to lose. And now there was no more hiding, no more shadows. If he wanted her alive, he would have to face them head-on. The warehouse on the outskirts of Seoul stank of oil and dust, its broken windows rattling in the wind. Inside, Nia sat bound to a chair, her wrists raw from struggling. Her heart pounded as footsteps echoed across the concrete floor. The scar-faced man who had taunted her earlier paced in front of her, a cruel smile on his lips. "Your precious Min-suk," he sneered. "He will come, and when he does, he will die." Nia fought to stay strong, but her chest was tight with fear. She tried to tell herself Min-suk wouldn't come, that he would be smart enough to stay away. But deep down, she knew him better than that. He would come, and he would risk everything. Outside, black cars screeched to a halt. Min-suk stepped out first, dressed in black, his expression carved from stone. Around him, a handful of his loyal men gathered, weapons in hand. He had tried to cut ties with this world, to disappear into silence. But tonight, he embraced it one last time for her. "Boss," one of his men said, gripping his arm, "this is suicide. They outnumber us." Min-suk's voice was cold, steady. "They took her. I'm not leaving without her." He moved forward, each step fueled by something more powerful than fear, more powerful than hate.
Love.
The warehouse doors burst open with a deafening clang. Gunfire erupted instantly, shattering the night. Bullets tore through walls and pillars as Min-suk's men clashed with the rival gang. Shouts, screams, and the metallic scent of blood filled the air. Min-suk moved like a man possessed, dodging bullets, firing with deadly precision. Every second was a race against time. Every heartbeat reminded him, "She's in here. She needs me." Inside, Nia flinched at the chaos exploding around her. Her breath came in sharp gasps as men fell one by one. And then, through the smoke and violence, she saw him. Min-suk. His dark eyes locked on hers across the warehouse. For a split second, the world stilled. "Min-suk," she cried, her voice breaking. He pushed forward, cutting down anyone who stood in his path. But the scar-faced man stepped behind Nia, pressing a knife to her throat. "Stop right there, Kang Min-suk," the man shouted. "One more step and she dies." Min-suk froze, his chest heaving. The barrel of his gun lowered slowly, his jaw tight with fury. "You don't want to do this," he said evenly. "Let her go. She has nothing to do with us." The man laughed harshly. "Nothing to do with you? She's the only reason you came running. She's your weakness. And now she'll be the reason you die." The knife pressed closer against Nia's skin. Her pulse raced wildly. Don't do this," she whispered, her voice trembling. Min-suk's hands tightened around his gun. He couldn't risk firing. Not with her so close. For the first time in years, he felt powerless. And then, in a flash of reckless courage, Nia stomped her foot on the ground, jerking her head to the side. The knife slipped just enough. That was all Min-suk needed.
Bang.
The gunshot echoed through the warehouse. The scar-faced man dropped, his knife clattering against the floor. Min-suk rushed forward, ripping the ropes from Nia's wrists. She collapsed into his arms, shaking violently. "You came," she whispered through tears. "Of course I did." His voice broke, raw and unguarded. I'll always come for you. But before relief could settle in, another gunshot rang out. Pain tore through Minsuk's side. He staggered, blood blooming across his shirt. Another rival, hidden in the shadows, had fired. His men took him down instantly, but the damage was done. Minsuk, Nia screamed, catching him as he fell to his knees. The battle faded into background noise as she pressed her hands desperately against his wound. No, 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 you're not leaving me. Stay with me. He reached up, his bloodied hand cupping her face. His eyes, usually so guarded, were wide open now, vulnerable. Nia, he rasped, his breath shallow. I tried to keep you away from all this, but I can't anymore. I can't lie to myself. Her tears blurred his face. Don't talk like that. You'll be okay. I'll fix this. Just stay with me. He shook his head faintly. Listen, you're the only one who ever saw me as more than a monster. More than a boss. You saw me as a man. And his voice cracked. I love you, Nia. I love you more than my own life. Her heart shattered and mended all at once. She pressed her forehead against his, sobbing. I love you too. You hear me? I love you too. So, don't you dare die on me. With trembling hands, she tore strips of fabric from her clothes, pressing them against his wound with all the skill she had learned in her training. Her hands were slick with his blood, her body shaking with panic, but she forced herself to focus. You're going to live, she whispered fiercely. Because I'm not letting you go. Not now, not ever. Hours later, after the fighting had ended and his enemies scattered, Minsuk lay in a hospital bed under heavy guard from his men. Nia never left his side. She sat by his bed, holding his hand tightly, her head resting against the sheets. When he finally stirred, his eyes opening weakly, the first thing he saw was her. You stayed, he whispered. Always, she said softly, squeezing his hand. Weeks passed. The city outside was still dangerous. His enemies weren't gone.
But for now, they had peace.
One evening, Minsuk took her to the rooftop of a tall building overlooking Seoul. The city stretched endlessly before them, a sea of glittering lights against the night sky. Nia leaned against him, her head on his shoulder, her heart steady for the first time in months. Are you afraid? She asked quietly. He wrapped an arm around her, pulling her closer. Every day. But as long as you're with me, I'm not running anymore. She lifted her face to his. In the glow of the city, their lips met, a kiss both fragile and fierce, filled with every promise they couldn't put into words. They didn't know what tomorrow would bring. The world outside was dangerous, and love was their greatest risk. But it was also their greatest refuge. And tonight, on that rooftop under Seoul's night sky, it was enough. The city looked different after everything. Seoul's neon lights still burned bright, buses still rumbled down busy streets, and cafes still filled with laughter. But for Nia, the world had shifted forever. She could never look at a crowd without wondering who might be watching. She could never hear footsteps behind her without feeling her heart leap into her throat. And yet she wasn't alone anymore. Minsuk kept his promise. Even after the battle at the warehouse, after nearly bleeding out of her arms, he stayed. His men whispered that he should disappear, go into hiding again, but he refused. If they come for me, he told her one night, his voice low but firm, they'll find me here, with you. At first, those words terrified her. But over time, she realized they were also his vow. For the first time in his life, he wasn't running. Healing wasn't easy. Minsuk's wounds took weeks to close, leaving scars across his body, scars Nia tended with quiet devotion. She spent nights at his side, changing dressings, whispering reassurances when pain racked his body. Sometimes, when he drifted between sleep and waking, he murmured things he would never admit aloud in daylight, apologies, regrets, dreams of a life without blood and violence. Nia listened to every word, her heart breaking and mending all at once. She wanted to believe those dreams could come true. But every time she stepped outside and saw black cars parked just a little too long on the street, or strangers lingering near the cafe where she worked, she knew the shadows weren't done with them. One chilly evening, weeks after the warehouse, Nia sat on the balcony of their small apartment. The city stretched before her in glittering silence. Behind her, Min-suk emerged quietly, his steps softer than she would have expected from a man his size. "You're awake," she said, turning to see him leaning against the railing, his dark hair tousled. "I can't sleep," he admitted, his gaze on the horizon. "You should try." The doctor said rest. He cut her off gently. "Do you regret it, Nia? Letting me stay. Letting me into your life."
Her chest tightened.
She thought of the fear, the lies, the nights she cried alone, wondering if she had been a fool. But she also thought of the way he had looked at her when he confessed his love. The way he had thrown himself into a storm of bullets just to save her. The way her heart beat differently when he was near. "No," she said finally, her voice steady. "I don't regret it. Even if it's dangerous. Even if it's hard. I'd rather face the darkness with you than live safely without you." For a long moment, he stared at her, his expression unreadable. Then, slowly, his hand reached for hers, warm and firm. "You're braver than me," he murmured. She squeezed his fingers.
No.
"I just chose you." But the world wasn't ready to let them go. It began with a phone call late one night. Min-suk's jaw tightened as he listened, his knuckles white against the phone. When he hung up, Nia asked softly, "What is it?" "They're regrouping," he said, his voice like steel. "The ones who survived the warehouse. They're planning something bigger. They want to finish what they started." Fear coiled in Nia's stomach, but she forced herself to stay calm. "Then we'll face it. Together." He looked at her, something raw flickering in his eyes. "I don't want you in this world." "You don't get to decide that," she whispered. "I already am." He closed his eyes, exhaling slowly. For the first time, he realized she wasn't just the girl who had patched his wounds. She wasn't fragile. She wasn't naive. She was his anchor, his partner. And he couldn't bear the thought of losing her. Days later, the reckoning came. Nia had just finished her last shift at the cafe when she noticed a black car idling across the street. Her pulse spiked. She hurried home, her hands clutching her bag, her eyes darting everywhere. When she reached the apartment, Min-suk was already waiting by the door, gun holstered at his side. "They're here," he said calmly. The next hours blurred into chaos. Shouts echoed through the stairwell as footsteps pounded closer. Min-suk's men fought viciously, holding the line as Nia huddled in the kitchen, her heart slamming in her chest. At one point, a masked man broke through the door, charging toward her. Nia screamed, but before the blade reached her, Min-suk was there, moving faster than she thought possible despite his injuries. The man collapsed, and Min-suk stood between her and the danger, his chest rising and falling like a beast cornered.